To feed your sourdough starter, get it out of the fridge in the morning after breakfast. I start with 100 grams of sourdough starter and I add 100 grams of bread flour. I use white because I like to make white sourdough, but you can use wholemeal if you want to. You can alternate wholemeal and white if you want to. Some people say that the wholemeal makes it tastier, but the white gives a better rise. So 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water added to your sourdough starter. You can use warm water, that will just help your sourdough starter bubble up a bit more quickly. Give it a really good mix up. So this is just feeding your starter. It needs more flour and water to keep it healthy. It's a really easy pet to look after because you can just keep it in the fridge when you don't want it. There it is, nice and gloopy, lovely. Then scrape down the sides. And you can cover your jar with a tea towel or a piece of cling film. I just put the lid back on, but I don't screw it tight because that sourdough starter is going to be making lots of bubbles. So leave it for a few hours, depending on how active it already is and how warm the room is and how long it's been in the fridge. It will take different amounts of time to get going. I've sped this up quite a lot. As you can see, it's getting quite big now. You could use it at this point, that would be fine, but I've let it go up a little bit more. So mine actually sat on the side all day, and about 5 o'clock I decided it was ready to make my dough. So I don't have any waste. I use 200 grams of sourdough starter, so I always have 100 grams left at the end. So in a nice big bowl, measure out your 200 grams of starter. There it goes. It's very gloopy. And when I've finished with my starter, I scrape down the sides again and put it back in the fridge. Every so often I clean out the jar and get a new one just so it doesn't go manky. That can go back in the fridge. Now I put my flour in. So I order sacks of flour from Shipton Mill, and this is organic white bread flour that I'm putting in. And I use 650 grams of flour. This will make 2 loaves of sourdough bread. Next, I add 20 grams of salt. This is just table salt or cooking salt that I put in there. I tried using half salt once, but it really did not taste good, so don't mess with the amount of salt. And 400 millilitres or 400 grams of water. I think I use cold, but again, if you want to speed it up a bit, use just tepid water. Once you've measured all that out, so that was 200 grams of starter, 650 grams of flour, 20 grams of salt, 400 millilitres of water. Give it a mix in your big bowl. This spoon I'm using is actually a salad server spoon, but I find it mixes the dough really nicely. It is really sticky, so I wouldn't recommend getting your hands in. Just get a nice big comfortable spoon and mix it all up so that you haven't got any flour that's left over at the end. The dough will stick to the sides of your bowl and become rock hard, so scrape as much down from the sides as you can as you're mixing it around. It doesn't look very smooth, but you don't need to knead it at this point. Just get it mixed up. Then find yourself a tea towel. That was Zach waving at you, by the way, that little hand. Find yourself a tea towel, put that over the top, and now you're going to let it rest. I usually let it rest for an hour, but anywhere from 40 minutes up to an hour or two is fine. Now we do what we call a stretch and fold. So if you imagine the points of a compass, we stretch it north, south, bit more flour. It's very sticky. And east and west, so that you've stretched and folded each side of the dough. And then turn it upside down. Put the tea towel back on and let it rest for another hour or so. There's my timer. I'm going to speed it up a bit now. So we're going to do the stretch and fold again. North, south, east, west. Some people get it out onto the surface and do this, but I just think it's fine. Just do it in the bowl. Pop the tea towel back on again, another hour or so. So you're going to want to do this at least 3 times. I often lose count and I'm not really quite sure how many times I've done it. Do it a few times until it's nearly time for bed and you want to get your dough ready. When you're ready to put your dough into your bowls or baskets for proving, give it a final stretch and fold. You can see it's nice and supple now and smooth. And get whatever you're using to prove it in ready. I have a banneton and then I use a small Pyrex bowl as well. I use rice flour to put inside it because if you put normal bread flour in, it doesn't actually stop it sticking at all, and sourdough dough is extremely sticky. So I give it a dusting of rice flour. And then you need to cut your dough in half. I don't cut it because I can't be bothered to get a knife out, so I just kind of squidge it. But that does mean that my loaves are often not the same size. So you could cut yours if you want to be a little bit more specific about your size. Now I fold it over so that the outside is nice and smooth, like as if I was making a bread roll, and try and get some of that rice flour on the outside. It's going to stick to the bowl, but it hopefully won't stick too much to the banneton. Now they're ready to just sit overnight. And I did change the tea towel because that one has a hole in. Leave them now until the morning. In the morning you need to get your pot ready and hot in the oven. Here's my lovely non-stick liner that I use in my iron casserole pot. So I'm going to put the oven on. In a fan oven, I cook it at 240. In my old gas oven, I used to cook it at 220, I think. So put your pot in the oven. You want to get that nice and hot, ready to cook your bread in. Once it's up to temperature, you need to get it out and put your first round of dough in. I use a pasta dish just to get it into this liner, so then I can carefully lift it into my pot. This is the one in the bowl. It's stuck to the outside quite a lot, so just try and get it away as much as I can. If you oil the bowl and then put the flour in, that works a bit better. So I'm just putting it away because otherwise it's not going to come out. Put it into the liner. There's a bit of rice flour left on the top, so just smooth that out a little bit. It gives quite a nice floury top. And then use a very sharp knife, or I use a bread knife, to make 3 slits in the top, or whatever pattern you would like to use. And now I can lift that into my pot. You can use greaseproof paper or another kind of non-stick liner. Put the lid back on and it goes into the oven. And cook it for 30 minutes. No, not an hour and 30 minutes, just 30 minutes will be fine. But after 30 minutes, it's not done, it still needs to brown. So what you need to do is take the lid off and put it back in for another 10 minutes. The reason we do this is because if you don't cook it either in a steam-filled oven or in a pot, the outside will harden too quickly and it won't have time to rise nicely. So after another 10 minutes with the lid off, it's lovely and brown and well cooked, and we can get it out and do the next one. If you don't want to cook them both on the same day, just put one of them in the fridge and cook one day and the other one the next day. The fridge will just slow down the rising. Now we're going to do the one out of the banneton. That hasn't stuck as much, but it still sticks a little bit, so I just make sure it's ready to come out. It does make a lovely pattern on the top. 3 slices into the pot. Make sure you put the lid on, and that goes into the oven for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, we take the lid off. You can see it's risen really nicely, but it's looking a bit pale. Ten more minutes in there. And it's ready. You don't want to eat these when they're hot, but really nice when they're still warm. And great the next day for toast. There you are, 2 beautiful sourdough loaves of bread.